this Burnout Extra, we have another oil change tutorial with a 2003 Toyota Rav4. So in this video, follow the steps along and I'll show you how to change the oil for this car. The first thing that you're going to want to do is pop the hood and loosen the oil filler cap. Open the hood with the latch right near the driver's seat, and then from there, remove the filler cap. Removing the oil fill cap will actually allow the oil to drain more easily when you have the car off of the ground and you're draining the oil from the bottom of the pan. Once you have the cap off, now you're good to raise up the car and loosen the oil drain plug to drain the oil. Once you have the car off of the ground, now it's time to loosen the oil drain plug. Before you loosen the oil drain plug, it's actually also good to know that this oil could be hot. So if the car was just running for a long time, you might burn yourself on the oil. So at this point, if you were just driving the car, it's best to let it sit for about 15 to 20 minutes and let the car cool down. Secondly, if the car's been sitting for a long time, it's actually good to run the car for about 10 seconds, maybe 20 seconds. Even a minute is fine, and that ultimately will get the oil through the system and nice and warm so that when you drain the oil, it will drain easier. However, it will not make it too hot to where you burn yourself. So, little disclaimer, but it helps out if you don't know that. Now this plug specifically for this 2003 Rav4 is located on the passenger side of the car at the front here. You'll see that there's a little drain plug on the side, kind of shooting towards the passenger front tire. And that's gonna be a size 14. So whether you use a ratchet and socket or a wrench, you're gonna wanna put a 14mm tool on that. And then I like to double up the wrenches for better leverage. And then you're just gonna wanna lightly crack that loose in order to loosen it from there. Now, once you have that loose, definitely be aware that oil will start to come out eventually. So make sure that you have a pan or even a Bunsen burner pan if you're doing it in the driveway, but make sure you have a pan ready to catch the oil. And once again, it will shoot out the side. At this point, you can just loosen it with a wrench or with your hand from here and put the pan underneath. After you've loosened the oil drain plug and that is continuing to drain, this car is actually super easy because the oil filter is right next to the pan as well, and that's tucked up right inside here. Once you have this draining out, you're actually good to loosen that oil filter. Sometimes you might need to get an oil filter wrench on that oil filter to loosen it and get it off. However, you might be able to just grab it with your hands and also twist to the left to remove that. And once again, because the filter is up into the engine, it's actually going to be filled with oil. It's almost like a cup where it holds oil. So when you bring it down from the engine, just remember that it's filled with oil and to dump it right into the pan that you're using. At this point, it's now time to put in the new oil filter. A couple things that you might want to do before putting in the oil filter is write the mileage and the date of the oil change right on the bottom of the filter. That allows the next mechanic to ultimately see when it was last done, especially if you don't have a little sticker on your windshield that tells you when the next service is due or when the last oil change was done. I just write it right on the filter because that shows when the filter was last changed. On top of that, some people don't change their filter every single time they do the oil change. This just shows when the filter was last actually changed. From here, you're gonna wanna do two things to this oil filter. First is remove the plastic cap that is on top. You don't want this plastic here because it will keep the filter from filtering the oil. So you wanna remove that plastic. The second thing that you're going to want to do is take a little bit of old oil and rub it around this new black rubber seal right here. Ultimately, that will allow the oil filter to tighten on more smoothly and get a snug fit when installing the new one. And you want to double check that this black seal here is not stuck on the engine block from the old oil filter. So you want to make sure that when you take out the old oil filter, that black seal comes with it, simply because there is a new one on the new filter. From there, you're good to install the new filter. Now, when installing the new oil filter, it's important that you don't over tighten it because you can easily strip the threads that the oil filter goes onto. You just want to tighten it by hand, and then once it gets too tight for one hand, get two hands on it if you can, and then just tighten it the best you can, and that is all you need. Once again, you don't want to over tighten this because you don't want to strip the threads. Now it's time to put back in the oil drain plug. And just like the oil filter, this is something that you don't want to over tighten either. Another thing to notice when you're putting the drain plug on is that this rubber piece right on the inside of the actual bolt stays on here. And this will ultimately provide a better seal from the oil leaking out through the bottom of the drain pan. So once again, sometimes it's a little rubber O-ring. This one happens to be a rubber washer, but regardless, make sure it is on your bolt before you put it back in the oil pan. At this point, once again, you want to get your 14mm ratchet and socket or wrench and just tighten that bolt there. Now, just like the oil filter, you don't want to over tighten this. So just remember to make sure that you are pulling correctly and don't use your full strength, because that's when you'll strip the bottom of that bolt. And you don't want this bolt to strip, otherwise oil will leak everywhere. Once you have this tight and once you have the oil filter in, you are ready to drop down the car and add new oil to the car. After you've lowered the car, now it's time to add the oil. So make sure you find the oil filler spot where you removed the cap before. Grab a funnel and place that right in that spot. For this car specifically, once again, this is a 2003 Rav4 with a 2.0 liter engine. So this is going to take 5 weight 30 oil, and it's going to take 4.4 quarts. Like I said, add 4.4 quarts of oil to this engine and you should be good to go. Now, after you've poured all 4.4 quarts of oil into the engine, what you should do is run the engine for about 10 seconds. And that will allow the new oil to go through the system of the engine. After that, stop the engine, come out to the dipstick and check the dipstick to make sure that you have the correct reading on the dipstick for this particular engine. And that's the same with any car. If you're not sure how many quarts go into your car, be sure to Google it with the correct size engine that you have, and ultimately it will tell you online. That's going to be all for this Burnout Extra. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check out our merch on our website if you haven't already. That's just below in the description. Hopefully this helped you do an oil change on your car, and we will see you next time.